introduction about Caro. So Caro's work predominantly is performance, sculpture, collage, photography, installation as well. You did an MFA at Goldsmiths. In fact, both of you were both at the same time. So both of the artists, MFA at Goldsmiths at the same time. And have subsequently done performances at the National Portrait Gallery and the Tate, and exhibited at the Royal Academy and various other places in London. And Janet, also MFA at the Goldsmiths and MA as well, is that right?
Yeah.
So for Goldsmiths, yeah. With your work as predominantly sculpture and installation and painting as well. With a nice intersection between abstract and figurative, and a lot of research into this idea of the mother artist and the maternal subject, and etc., which we're going to be touching on later tonight. And you've exhibited also extensively around the UK, Spike Island I saw, and here in London, Deptford X, and you've got an exhibition opening next week, which maybe you can tell everyone about a little bit later. So, at San May Gallery in Brixton. So we're going to start by thinking about the subject of the female aesthetic, as you know. And Caro, I wonder if you wouldn't mind kicking that off with this piece.
Yeah, sure. This is called like Ease and Balance. I produced it myself at Goldsmiths. I was there for 4 years at one time, and it's actually stemmed from a collage that I made originally, and it's all about the mother and the artist as well. Interestingly, about being stuck and confined to the domestic sphere, and then this came like the whole fact of like, you know, that aspect of not feeling not the unhinged feeling, but more just like you had so many plates that you were spinning, you didn't know which way you're going, like just like juggling it all, and then that whole like keeping everything on balance, like your home life, your work life, your life as an artist, and then this predominantly was shown in the Goldsmiths NFA final show 2016 as a tufted wall piece, and then it also had a 3-hour sound piece that was shown in the space in Laurie Baths. So it was all about who is this disobedient, you shine, I look away. It's like a long monotone of like 2 or 3 people talking about the, you know, being at home, being a mother, being an artist, and it's sort of like continuous sort of conversation between men and women. It was like a woman and a man that I really to take part in it, and then you know, so the idea was that the rug was talking to you. It's a bit like the rugs have so much, like there's a rug here, the rugs have so much history attached to them, and the idea that, you know, normally you'd have a rug on the floor, but this is on the wall, so it's just like, you know, to take you straight away, you're thinking that's weird, it's on the wall rather than on the floor, and just...
But it's also referencing the whole history of like that use of that medium within like feminist art, etc.
Yeah.
Taking this female aesthetic of something that wasn't seen as a high art form and turning it into a high art.
Yeah, exactly. You know, I was looking at Tracy and Annie Elbows, the Tate. There's various, even has some vocal works as well. But I mean, the actual process tufting isn't like your normal rag works anyway. It's like a particular skill that you have to learn and be adapted on. So it was a particular sort of skill to make it and do the embroidery as well. But, I mean, it's like referencing craft and then referencing it as fine art as well.
I was just thinking how interesting it is at Goldsmiths, because you used that there was a place that you could make rugs, and you could, because there was an amazing textile BA at Goldsmiths in the past. It was very much about it had a very fine art context, and was very much about, it was kind of world leading in terms of bringing that kind of traditionally kind of female practice into fine art. And actually often back in the day, that show, which would show at the same time as the BA in fine art, textiles department was often much more conceptual and much more challenging and very feminist. So it's kind of really interesting. I didn't think about that before, the way this work kind of fits into that tradition.
Yeah. And Janet, I'd like to move across to your kind of relationship with this female aesthetic and soft furnishings and this whole idea of taking the appropriation of these traditionally female type materials and methods and using them in your work and celebrating them.
I think that's always been a thing I was thinking today. I mean, it's interesting sitting here with you and looking at your work, because I don't think we've, you know, we have a personal connection, but we haven't actually really talked about our work. Yeah. Although we know each other's work, and it's really interesting to see how much connection there is. Yeah. Just, you know, anyway, I was thinking today about when I first started my BA, and I was probably really like 20 or something, and I went to the woodwork shop where you had to make a stretcher, and I couldn't use any of the tools, and the technician and my tutor, who was actually a really famous artist, and were laughing at me, and I mean, not in a dramatising way, but they were laughing at me, and I remember saying to them, I was thinking about this today, I remember saying to them, yeah, but if you get me in the kitchen, I know exactly what I'm doing, and I could cook better than either of you, and I could cook anything you asked me to cook. And I was really struck then by this kind of thing about the way there's a hierarchy of skill and knowledge, and that somehow my knowledge of cooking wasn't as valuable as, and also that there was a kind of privilege about the way you acquire knowledge. So I didn't know how to do woodwork, and I was intimidated by that. So after that, I started putting recipes in my painting, because I just really wanted to be saying, I've got this whole huge amount of knowledge that I have, that I've learned over my lifetime, and I really want it to be valued, and I really want it to have currency. So that's kind of always been a thing, I think, in my work. But
do you want to just...
So this is, I mean, Goldsmiths is great because it had really great textiles facilities, and you could take a painting and you could print it, and that's what I did. You could make fabric from your painted work, which was amazing. And obviously I was painting fabric, so pattern and fabric are really important, because my work is very much about my experience in domestic. So, I mean, I'll talk about pattern a bit more, because it's a very layered thing for me, but I think, I mean, there's a few pictures of this installation, but I think this is probably my proudest item from my show, because I actually mastered piping, and so I was just very pleased with myself, because I've managed this sewing technique, and I think kind of putting it there in my degree shows a kind of very sort of resistant kind of thing. But I think the sewing thing is a thing that I've always done. Again, it's a thing that I just learned how to do. My mum taught me how to sew, and she was very particular about measuring and cutting and the perfection of sewing. So, yeah, it's quite important to have it there.
So there was also the issue of pattern that we'll come back to pattern as well, further down, further along the view and baking pieces.
No. Nice to see you. Yeah.
But we just want to look at these two pictures with regards to pattern.
Yeah. So, I mean, I think maybe I'm going to talk a little bit about labour and pattern a bit later on. But I think, you know, for me, one of the things about pattern is the way that it kind of has a narrative. So this was like this. I did a lot of work with this pattern that I found in Deptford Market, and it was an old sheep pattern. And it seems really important to me to be trying to, one of the things I think I'm trying to do a lot with pattern is to think about it as something that has narrative. I mean, I think I'm really drawn to domestic pattern, but I think that for most of us, we kind of, I don't know if people have ever read The Yellow Wallpaper, but there is a thing about pattern unlocking a narrative. So we sort of can sit and look at wallpaper in a video in a room, and then when we see that wallpaper again, we're like, there's a lot of memory and life narrative that's contained in the pattern that surrounds our intimate spaces, like curtains and bed sheets and all of those kind of things. So those things, trying to use those in my work has been a pretty obsessive kind of thing. Yeah. So I made a whole series of these paintings. This one is different. I mean, it's more about fine art context, because I was kind of thinking about Damon Hirst's dots. I mean, this is called Archive. It has a particular narrative to it, but it was, I mean, using polka dots, which is a kind of ubiquitous pattern, isn't it? But it also has a fine art use. And trying to play around that thing of it being something that's very everyday, and it also being something that's, you know, those dot paintings of his commands, you know, they're very valuable. They have a huge market value, and so they're kind of commodity in a different, in a fine art context, I suppose. But
so I like the way you're referencing people like this, and the way you also do the Crucifili, like that thing of you put your paintings or canvases sometimes on the soft furniture or cushion things that you make. And there are these references of these contemporary male artists that you're taking their distinguishing features and you're pulling it back in, I think.
Yeah, and I mean this has a really big narrative context for me because these are actually plasters, so they're kinds of a kind of archive of illness, of, you know, going through a process of treatment where you're being cannulated or having blood taken, and so they're kind of a record of the whole process of a very bodily and kind of female process as well. They're not just formal things, they're actually kind of a very personal record for me of a process that I went through. So there's a kind of whole narrative side to them that I think is really, I'm always trying to get at with pattern.
Yeah.
And I struggle with that.
Yeah. So we're going to move on from the female aesthetic towards the subject of motherhood. And Caro, what I first wanted to ask you was, you've done some work on this within the curatorial field. I wondered if you could talk a bit about that, specifically within regards to mothership, and then what came out of that, which isn't just to do with the mother, but celebrating female artists.
Yeah. Well, mothership came along. There's a fellow colleague and myself, both of those, and she suggested us doing an exhibition. You know, because she was concerned about the fact that like women were sort of undervalued in the art world, like goldsmiths and outside college as well. So she sort of like we both had quite a few discussions about it in the last year or so on my MFA. So and then we just like Joanne was in that show as well. And then it was really more it was more a celebration of other artists. It wasn't like everybody's work was specifically about motherhood. Like yours probably wasn't it? The cue that you did. I can tell you about that in a minute. And then like my friend Susan Martin, she did a piece which was all about her breastfeeding. So it was like a sound piece of her breastfeeding her Indian lady. So we invited like, I think there was 10, 12, 15 artists, and you know, we showed it at Sawmills in Wandsworth, and then it moved to Bruton Art Factory, and sadly we haven't done any shows since then because both became busy with, I was then applying for PhDs and Elizabeth was doing other things in her life, so we haven't really moved it on. So
it feels to me like you moved it on by starting the space that you've now started.
Yeah, and then I started another exhibition space, which is called Newborn, which is sort of referencing newborns as in babies, but it's also referencing mothers. So but it's not mothers actually, that one, it's actually female. I felt that was too narrow margin, so I've actually invited Janet again was in that show, which is ongoing, and that's actually shown in domestic space, but it's like, it's all female artists again, London-based and Suffolk-based, but that gave me the opportunity to invite people I know that are female artists, but not necessarily, they don't necessarily have children, so, but that's ongoing. I mean, that's sort of something that I'm working on at the moment. It hasn't really been sort of like, I haven't really sort of finalised which way it's going to go at the moment.
Motherhood's also been, I read somewhere, it's called the last taboo of the art world, and it seems like it's this thing that's kind of not really addressed fully head-on sometimes. But I wondered if you could talk us through this performance piece that you did, because it's very specifically to do with your experience as a mother, as a new mother, in fact.
Yeah. I mean, this is a very personal piece for myself. I made it in, I think it's in 2014. I know 2000. It was exhibited in 2018, but originally I made it in 2000.
Sorry, this piece is called A Day in the Life of a 1950s Housewife.
So yeah, it's all to do with being well, being a mother, and then it's also this sound piece which is really told through an object and recited through a sort of installation piece, and it's commenting on like today's society, being a mother, being an artist, and then it was also referencing the 1950s, because at that particular time I was encouraged at Goldsmiths to look at Betty Friedan, so, you know, which was all about, you know, the fact that women stay at home. Women, obviously, I had this discussion before, talk about how, like Janet was saying, like most people she knows do work and have family. Whereas I know actually quite a lot of people that haven't worked and have had a family and the children have almost left home. So we sort of, you know, we're talking about like difference of people we know, you know, like in London or outside London. So this was all about asking that same question from that has no name. And you know, I felt when I was like first at Goldsmiths, I was studying, I didn't have any time to go to any lecture. I was sort of quite trapped in a home. So the only time I went out was to like, well, probably private views or events related to my husband. So and then that sort of led me on to Mad Men. That was sort of, yeah, it was in 2015 because that's when Mad Men became really big on TV. Everybody was watching it, and so the diary, which there's like a diary that goes with this. I asked an actress, Carrie Lambert, to do the recital of it. It's based on a day in a life in southwest London, and it's quite humorous, and it is based on people I know, but they'll become fictional characters in the piece. But I think it's really true still now where I live actually, but which is a bit ironic. So and then it's also influenced by Helen Chadwick, who I was looking at the time, who, you know, transforms performance into sculpture and objects, and I was really interested in the piece that she did with the oven, which, you know, like she had, you know, a series of shots when she had an oven on her, you know, which was all tied to the, you know, whatever the famous wording is, isn't it? Like, tied to this, you know, like, there's a special word for it, you know, like tied to the kitchen or something. Yeah, that's it. So, yeah.
Change the kitchen sink.
Yeah, something. But anyway, so Helen Chadwick's piece was referencing that, and that was probably who I was initially looking at when I was making this piece as well. You know, hers is like an inflatable piece. So
there's some interesting comments that come out from artists who, female artists who haven't had children, who say that it's not possible to be an artist and have children, which is quite contentious, I think. And I like the way both of you kind of addressed it head on to celebrate it, explore it, and see what it is. So for you, which we'll talk about in a minute, your kind of relationship with the maternal subject is it's not perfect, but it, you know, it is what it is, and kind of it's celebrated for that sort of imperfection. So yeah. So this is one of your pieces.
Yeah, so I think there's two of these aprons, and again, I was obviously really interested in this gingham fabric, and I mean, I think, so I kind of made those pink pieces which were very flat in a way, although there was bodily stains on them, that was a reference to the body, and there was a reference to kind of worminess. This kind of thing, body appearing out of these was quite, I think, probably quite significant, that it's very definitely a female body, and I think gingham, it is about kind of playing on that kind of Friedan idea of the housewife. It is a kind of, as an apron, so that's a kind of maternal symbol, isn't it? And I mean, these pictures, there's another one, I don't know if we want to look at the other one too, because there are two of these, and they're very much about the idea of a kind of perfection and a desire for a perfection. And I think always when I think of the maternal subject, I have a lot of ambivalence about it, that I love being a mother, I relate to being a mother, but there's also this kind of constant anxiety, and this constant that you're holding everything, and everything's going to fall and collapse into chaos at any given minute. So I think there was very much this in these pictures, and they're very, like the making of them is particular because they're made with special gesso, so they're kind of, there's a lot of work goes into making a surface before you even start painting, and they're made with a kind of watercolour. I mean, it's not watercolour, but they're it's a watercolour kind of mark, so there's a kind of one-hit, kind of very performative kind of way of painting them that is very anxiety-making. And that seemed like a really important part of the content of the paintings for me, that there was this idea that I had one chance to kind of get these aprons right, and I did lots of rehearsing, and people said, why are you doing that? But that was that anxiety in the work, I think, at this stage. I don't think it's there so much now, but it was a very important part of the whole thing that I was trying to talk about. So in this one, there's kind of these weird, wormy kinds of things that could be kind of tumoury, or they could actually be like worms or something that, you know, when you have children, and sometimes they get worms, and that's the reality of having children, is you like to be dealing with worms, you know what I mean? So, and also, there's kind of this thing about the stain again, and trying to get that thing clean, and kind of, yeah, so that's kind of very much really important. I don't know if you want to look at the other one again, but it's a similar kind of thing, and I think this one is similar, and there is a kind of, I mean, obviously there's nipples on there, and they were kind of, a stitch on the nipple was kind of, it was kind of like a make it crochet your own nipple.
But also, so it's hard to tell a sense of scale, but this piece is 140 by 1 metre.
Yeah, so it's
and a lot of these lines you did in a single.
Yeah, so they'd
in a
be in a single rush. No, they wouldn't. You'd have to do it in one go.
So that in itself is like this idea of control and control and
absolutely.
Trying to get perfection and etc.
And very much like a performance, because you had one chance to do it, and then if you got it wrong, then you have to restart again with this gesso. So and this one's called Shitstorm because it's just, I mean, I don't know, sometimes I think I could have made it more shitstormy, but it is about this idea that, you know, you want this perfection, you've got this idea about perfection and having to do it right, which I think I kind of really inherited from my own mother, and then there's just this shitstorm that comes and you're not going to be able to do anything about it, because that's how it is to be a maternal subject, really, is that you don't have any control anymore.
So these are two of them together.
Yeah, so that's the kind of installation with the bench. So the bench was a really important thing, and I think the bench also is about the fact that I think painting is a very slow thing to make, and it's a very slow thing, and often we don't sit. I don't know, people look at paintings for like 3 seconds or something, and then they're on, and like there's a thing about the punctum, the thing that's supposed to get you and grab you in, or it's a very kind of like, and I really, really, really wanted people to be able to sit down in the space and just be with the work for a while, and so that's why I made the bench. And then it was really nice, you know, mums came and breastfed on the bench and everything, so actually it was really lovely to have the bench there. And the bench is also, the print on the bench, again, obviously references this thing, and it has these kind of weird sort of things on it, which are kind of look like they're either sort of, I don't know, they look like horrible scabs or rolls, or they might be menstrual stains. So they're kind of, there's a whole thing about this kind of reference to bodily functions, to the abject, which is a really female thing. I mean, we're coming back into what you're talking about in the female aesthetic, this idea of the drip. There's another painting on this side that's just very drippy, but also this pink one, you know, it's got this stain, which is like the stain you get where on your mattress where you've slept on it, and it's got that yellowy kind of weird thing that you're always trying to get out, the stain remover, but it's just there because the body lies on a mattress for long enough, you know, that stuff oozes out. That's just
life though, isn't
and
it?
that you're you know, this kind of thing about materials, you know, like the baby grow that's got slightly, you know, as you're trying to clean it, is kind of really what I was trying to get at in these works. So there's also the thing about abjectness.
Yeah.
I didn't say anything about labour and the pattern, but
I think actually we should just touch on that because it's really important within your work.
So, I mean, there's a thing, and it's a bit like the thing about, you know, wanting to put a recipe in the work, an acknowledgement of labour. So for me also the pattern repeat is a kind of partly a metaphor for the labour of mothering, or effective labour, or not necessarily mothering. I mean, it's any kind of labour that we do to look after each other, really, I suppose. and how much labour there is in looking after each other and looking after the relationships that we have in our life, you know, our families and all of that stuff that we do. That's a very, I mean, everybody does that labour, but women, it particularly falls a lot to women, and it particularly falls a lot to mothers. So it's kind of that repeat, and that, I mean, particularly the pink one, I think, which is just like these millions and billions, what seem like millions, it's hundreds of these little flowers, very, very boring to make, and that seems really important, but also they're kind of, I kept thinking about, so that's there's the labour in the home, and the pattern being also about repeated things that you do all the time, you know, like doing the washing up. I mean, we all do that, don't we? Not just mothers and not just women, but all the repetitive, boring, hoovering, but also there's the thing about the labour that happens outside the home, productive labour and women. So I really used to think a lot about, and I mean, I say this with great humility, but women who painted china, you know, in Stoke, who painted these flowers and who had this huge skill about, and I don't think I wouldn't even get close to that skill, but so I was kind of thinking as well about the labour of women painting the same thing over and over and over again, and just getting it down to a T so that they could do it in their sleep. And then they'd have a thing where they'd do some subversive thing to just slightly make the flower different, so that, you know, there was some kind of perverse kink in it, you know. So there was very much a thing about also the kinds of work that women do outside the home, and trying to reference that. And, you know, just like fabric design, I mean, men and women do fabric design, but a lot of women do fabric design, and domestic, you know, all the domestic fabrics that are around us, baby grows, sheets, tea towels, all of those things, somebody's designed those, and those are also commodities, you know, that are traded. So anyway,
like it just reminds me of Judy Chicago. Recently in Newcastle, her seminar piece, she actually did employ a group of ladies to make all, you know, to do all those triangle plates.
Wasn't it? That was other women who did embroidery for her. And
but the plates were just, I mean, they are amazing.
So she did
what you're talking about.
So it's very much about kind of bringing those skills into like a fine art context and celebrating them, and saying this is the work that women do.
I mean, hers was referencing a different artist, female artist for each plate, wasn't it? But it was interesting when you looked at her plate video of that dinner party. It was all to do with the portrait, you know, like making those plates. It's quite interesting that overlap.
So I wanted to move on from that to the subject of equality and inequality within the art world. And for me, this was just an image that I wanted to pull up because there were a few, excuse me for reading my notes, but there were a few facts about this. So this is Jenny Savile's Proct, which came up for auction in October 2018. And it is the world record-breaking price for a living female artist when the hammer came down at 9.5 million. And it still is from 2 years before. But having made this record, of course, the moment of this great highlight for her was completely eclipsed by Banksy in the corner shredding a painting. So the next day, no one remembered the fact that this great record had been made for a female artist, and everyone remembers Banksy. So there's a lot of inequality both in thinking about things like that, but the actual figures as well are quite interesting. That the price of this, of 9.5 million, is still 40% of the record price of a living male artist at auction, which is 91.9 million for Jeff Queen's piece. And female artists represent 2% of the art market, which is just a bit crazy. And of that 2%, that's predominantly made up by 5 artists. So it's just all still, there's a long, long way to go within that equality. But a lot of work is being done on this at the moment. Museums are showing female artists the whole time and really redressing that balance. We've got a woman amazingly running the Tate, and lots of curators underneath her running, so Marie Balshaw, lots of other female curators running the other Tates in Liverpool, for example, Helen Beck there. So that's all coming around and being redressed. So there's a whole equality, sexual equality. but within your work, Caro, you look at this quite a lot, but you look further back into history and take female artists who were amazing but were overlooked, and you're shining the light back on them. So, yeah. So I wonder if we could look at that and you could talk about that a little bit.
Yeah, I mean, this is my most recent performance, but to put it in context, I applied for, well, I was looking at PhDs about 2 years ago at Birkbeck, and this one that caught my eye was investigating and looking at the status output of amateur and professional women printmakers in the long 18th century in London primarily. So I applied for the PhD, I wasn't successful in that one. So I then applied for a book to the Royal College of Art with the same research, but looking at it from an artist's perspective rather than an art historian's perspective. And initially I've just been researching Angelica Kaufman primarily, and then Mary Moses, most recent woman that I've been looking at. There's actually about 30 plus, well, there's about another 30 women in this particular period, from 1700s to the early 1800s, that haven't been investigated fully. I mean, there's somebody at Birkbeck looking at it maybe, but she's looking at it from an art historical.
And then so those two women were the first members?
Yeah, first two female members of the Royal Academy I've got my dates here, in 1768, and then Laura Knight was then made a Royal Academician, but not until 1936, so there's like, and even now there's still quite a small amount of female Royal Academicians compared to male Academicians. So this is my most recent performance that I did at the National Portrait Gallery. I didn't actually get permission to do this performance. I just went in one Sunday morning in September with a fellow colleague of mine who's actually an artist and a photographer and video artist. So we just sort of sneaked in. It was very empty. There's actually a video that goes with this as well, which is 7.5 minutes long. And we just did this really short video of me talking to Mary Moser. It's like a fictional conversation, which I wrote like a piece of text for, and then questioning her about, herself being overlooked, and like the fact that she was sort of classed as a flower painter, but she was also an amazing painter as well. This portrait is actually by Joshua Reynolds. So it's like, the idea was that my idea throughout my research is reenacting these women from the long 18th century, because there isn't anybody else doing that, and so I just thought that was a really interesting way of getting into their characters. So, but yeah, and then this one is Angelica Knight. This was my first performance I did at Tate Britain in 2018, which ended up like 25 emails later when eventually I got hold of Martin Myron, who is the senior curator at the Tate Britain, who also constantly works at, he's actually a lecturer at York University, so the only way I could actually get in contact with him was going direct to York University, and they kindly gave me all his email details, and he came back within like 24 hours and said, yes, I could do a photo, but I couldn't do a performance. But he actually wasn't there anyway, so he then put me in touch with somebody, head of filming, and we did like an afternoon of me standing next to Angelica Kaufman, sort of in props, and from that, I then published a book where it was part of the Royal College of Art, because I was staying on MRes, and we had this project called Air Project, which was artist in residence. So from that I wrote a series of sort of like texts in relation to this performance piece, which I can read.
That would be great if
now. So the first one is called A Day in the Life of Angelica Knight. I'm at the Tate Britain, which I had first visited on Monday to see if I could get permission to stand next to Angelica Kaufman in the spotlights room. A bag saying I can help, and I could stand over there next to her portrait of Angelica without permission. The bag said to double check at the information desk at the entrance to the Tate Britain, just in case. I said I wanted to dress up as Angelica Kaufman and to be in the frame with her. The information desk said they needed to check with the head of filming at Tate Britain. I asked a passerby, excuse me, could you take a photograph of me next to her in the portrait? Yes, over here. Excuse me, could you take a photograph of me? I'm pretending to be Angelica Kaufman. Can I stand inside the ropes? Thank you. Excuse me, security advises I need a step to stand on. 16th, I'm trying to find vintage. I'm in Brick Lane and my phone buzzes. It's from him, the curator of the Spotlights room. He says I can't do a performance. I ask if I can photograph him instead. He says I need to ask the visitors next time I'm at the Tate. They will let me take photographs of her instead. I found a frilly shirt to take with me to meet her. 17th, I've had an email from the head of filming. He says I can only do this on Thursday at 3 p.m. I need to visit Frame instead today. She calls me back and says she can meet me at the Tate tomorrow. Becoming Angelica. This proves more difficult than I had expected. And then this is another piece that I did, which was part of this was like a sound piece that I showed at the whip show at the Royal College of Art last year, and I had myself, and then there was a fellow artist called Julia Ward, and an actor called Matthew Gummy, that also did some of the pieces. So this is one of the pieces we did, which I think it's on my website. It might not be on there quite yet, but it has like sounds to it for gaps, but I'll read it as if it hasn't got sounds with this, but it normally does. A series of happenings in the spotlight. I wake up and I don't know where I am. I'm in the spotlight again. Someone is breathing down my back. A performative portrait. I step over and I realise I have been asleep here again in the spotlight's room. Self-appointed artist. In the spotlight. To be a painting. Like Angelica. I attempt to perform. Like Angelica in this frame. I'm looking at Angelica again. I'm scared. I may be discovered here in the spotlight. The floors are bare as I creep from underneath the rope barrier. There was a rumour that her eyes had moved to look at me. Every morning I would return to Angelica again. But anyway, the sound piece is like 30 plus minutes long, and it's sort of shown with another piece of work. But,
amazing, thank you for that. That was a real treat to have that. But I like the way that this has crossed over from the performances you do, both in front of the paintings and with Angelica Halford and Mary Moser, into the dabbers, the dabber and I, and then it kind of trickles down into your practice with your paintings and collages. So I just wanted to look at, so this was another piece in the Tate of you actually doing it, which is
fantastic feel to do that, honestly, like what would people like and what's the thing. Well, I remember this member came past with her son actually, who must have been at university, and he just went, oh, this is what they call contemporary art, or something in those lines, and he just carried on looking at it. Most people just stopped and took photos and then carried on, but it's quite sad because this year Martin Myron curated William Blake at the Tate Britain. It was on the BBC News one evening, and like 1.5 years ago, whenever Angelica Halford was showing the Tate, there was no publicity about her at all. Like, even the people at Tate said, all the curators and attendants said, not curators, the people that actually work, they all said that it wasn't actually visited very much. And like, interestingly now, Angelica Halford is going to be shown at Royal Academy of Arts from June to September this year, which I just noticed recently. So Royal Academy of Arts have realised that there's something there, and then so I presume all the work that was in this exhibition is probably now going towards the Royal Academy of Arts, and I presume they've got more works.
So can you go and do that there?
Well, that's what I'm planning to do, because the National Portrait Gallery is also closing in June, so it coincides with, I won't be able to go visit Mary Moser anymore, but instead I'll be able to go back to Angelica Halford. So it's just quite interesting how they're just realising now that there's all these women under the...
Yeah, that were being celebrated, coming up and really is coming to the spotlight. And then this as well, I think this is a rather amazing painting that you've done, where you have taken the picture and then kind of this idea of being blocked and coming out and the conflict within it that's being reversed.
Yeah, I mean, this is just like a copper plate that you'd use for doing etchings, so I do a lot of brickmaking, and then the idea was that Angelica Halford is sort of hidden behind me. It's like a blob of enamel paint actually, but I mean, it was made over quite a few months because I sort of dripped it, and it sort of splodged, it was like a new painted dry. And then the soap is sort of referencing, it's sort of referencing domestic sphere, I suppose, and then, I'm not like Janet's so you can be a painter, whereas I'm not really a painter, I'm more sort of, I tend to do more collages, but I sort of more expanding to expand the painting, I'd say. And then this is a piece called My Meeting with Mary Moser, which actually I made before I did I have a meeting with Mary Moser, but this was again from the National Portrait Gallery, and it's like the idea of the dabber, where she's got a red shawl on, and the idea that the dabber is like she's hidden behind this shadow, and like the dabber, which is what you use for printmaking, is hiding. Mary Moser, so it's like this whole idea of women being hidden, you know, by that.
But I know for this, for me, it's like coming out, so that it's all coming forward.
Yeah, and she is in the shadow. Yeah, I mean that was predominant. You know, it was intentionally made in a dark room, and it was projected like that. So it was as if I'd been subconsciously animated like that, and then you know my tutors at Royal Conjure Art were like, "Oh my, wow, that's amazing! You're portraying women in the shadows," which actually wasn't really the intention at the beginning of the exhibition, but it just it went that way because we had problems with like lighting. Naz in the audience was in the same exhibition, and we're like, oh, trying to find our spaces within the space. Yeah.
But I just wanted to loop back as well on another positive note with the idea that last year the first female president of the Royal Academy was elected with Rebecca Salter just in December recently. So that's there is change, but with change there's complications, which Janet, your research and your work kind of explores the territory of like now that women have more equality, it comes with other problems within it, I think, and the problematic with the concept of equality that comes about.
Last Girl. I think, so I did a lot of work on, I was trying to think about the maternal subject and the way, we have all this equality, we're able to work and we're able to do all these things, why does it still feel like we're stuck holding everything, I suppose? And I kind of really wanted to so it felt like things have moved forward, and I think they really have, I think they really have. I think there are more women artists out there. I absolutely hear your statistics. And I think there are more women in institutions, and clearly women work and women do lots of things, but still, we know that pay isn't equal. And I was quite obsessed with The Last Girl because I think she kind of came into the cinema when I had a small child, and I was a new mum, and I kind of had this kind of moment of recognition that I'm supposed to relate to Elastigirl. And of course, so Elastigirl has her superpowers that she can bend. I don't know, does anyone know Elastigirl here? You might have missed Elastigirl. There was a new Incredibles film a couple of years ago, which is quite an interesting kind of move on from Elastigirl, this first Incredibles film. But her superpower basically is that she can stretch and she can bend, she can do housework and reach all the corners.
But I know the fact that she's a superhero, but she gets to take her kids with her.
Yeah,
so you can have it all.
So it's all about really the way that you can have it all. If only you can have it all, but you have to be made of elastic. And I'm not made of elastic. I mean, so you kind of sit in the cinema and you're laughing, oh my God, if only I could have that superpower, that'd be great. Wouldn't that be wonderful? I could just do all this stuff, I could save the world. But it's a very political thing as well, because I think her husband is not coping very much with the kind of post-Fordist era of having to work in an office and deal with people all day, because he's a retired superhero as well. He's been retired because the government aren't allowing supers out into the world. And it's Helen Parr, his wife, who's Elastigirl, who really saves the day. But I think, there's something also deeply concerning about her as a role model, because, it is all about being very adaptable, and I think there's something very important that she represents in terms of a kind of idea of motherhood and an idea of womanhood in a kind of feminized workplace where there are more women working, but we all kind of are in this situation where there's less distinction between work and home, spatially, time-wise. We all look at emails on the weekends, kind of work never ends in the same way like being a mother never ends, you're always on call as a child.
So we were talking about it, that maybe equality hasn't brought more freedom, it's just
maybe
it's brought more work.
And I think that she kind of really represents this kind of a kind of neoliberal idea of kind of leaning in, and if only we could be more adaptable. And that's not just as women, I think that's, you know, the ideal worker would be Elastigirl, because they would be able to like do everything, stretch everywhere, do it at any time, you know, and just be available at any given moment to be able to do everything. And so, you know, I think there is that kind of thing that, and I think, you know, women are, I mean, a lot of my research is about the way in which, in this state where, in a kind of in a state of optimization, in a state of post-Fordism, a post-industrialized state, the skills that we need are the skills that we learn as females about dealing with emotion, about looking after people, about being able to be adaptable, and that we keep, as we practice those as women, as we practice those as women, we have to hold more and more, really, basically. So it always feels like we're doing more and more, and that ultimately kind of stymies us. So I mean, I was looking a lot at Silvia Federici and the whole campaign against housework, which was about the idea that actually women could win the place in the labour force, but actually what that ended up happening was that they didn't gain liberation, they just did a lot more work, because actually society doesn't recognise that somebody needs to look after the children, somebody needs to do the washing, all this labour that happens at home, whether men or women do it costs us, somebody has to do it. So so it's the idea that actually we may have equality in the workforce, but actually do we really have equality, and who does all this work? So
And then this fed back into your practice with this piece. With this idea of the kind of squeezing and.
So I think there was a kind of thing about compression with this piece, and this piece is called Pushback, because I kind of came up with the title. It was kind of just before various elections when pushback, people were talking about pushback, and that seemed like quite an interesting concept, the idea of pushback, because it was a kind of resistant response to something, and seemed like quite a dynamic term that was both about resisting and reacting. And so I guess this piece is very much about this idea of the compression of lots and lots of small, soft objects in a space that's, and they're held in there really, because a bit like sort of art de pauvre, is it? They're the force of the compression is holding them into that space. And there's a few more of those coming, I think.
Next week.
I do kind of, there's a thing that I really like about installation and installing lots of little objects that I really think is a childhood thing about arranging small things. It feels like a playing that I really, really like. So I did a lot when I was I did a lot of things where a film where I just filmed myself arranging. It was really dull, actually, but arranging these tiny, I had hundreds of tiny Polly Pocket shoes and handbags, and I just filmed myself arranging those into a sort of colour circle. And it was really about this idea of practicing being a consumer as a small girl child, arranging tiny plastic things into a colour, into a colour wheel. It was a colour wheel. So I think that there's also a thing about this, and I have a real memory of kind of creating little environments for Barbie, and taking things and then trying to read. So I think there's a kind of play involved in this as well.
Well, we'll have to come and see your show next week.
For sure.
The next section, I asked you both to pick someone who had influenced your work or who you admired or who you wanted to discuss, and we left it pretty open as to who that was. The sort of celebration of International Women's Day, and this was your choice, Caro.
Yeah, for me it has to be Eva Hess. I've sort of admired her for a long time, even when I was like Goldsmith. I just rewatched her film last night, the last documentary they made about her. I just think her expanded art practice was amazing. She experimented with so many materials. She went on courses. I mean, in the documentary, it says that her father was like really anti her becoming an artist and was like trying to encourage her to do undertake a professional career, but she like went against all odds, against her whole family to become an artist. I mean, she even went to university, funnily enough, so she did end up going to an amazing university to study fine art, but originally they sent her to a university in New York, which was doing portraits instead of life ordained. She rebelled against that because she wanted to be a conceptual artist. I mean, she was right sort of in the art scene at that time. It just looks so different to now, like in London or New York. Then it was a lot easier to, I mean, she became sort of immersed in the art scene because she was studying with the right people at art college and at Yale. Just interested also, like she commented in 1960 how women were up against it all and were invisible, which is quite interesting. She was commenting about it then. And it was sort of quite apparent at that stage. There's Sol LeWitt, there's Carl Andre, there's so many of those artists like Robert Smithson. They're all male artists that she was mixed with. Yeah, they're all there with her. But I was really sad because she died when she was 34. She actually died in 1970 when I was actually born, so it's kind of weird that that all happened. But I like the fact that her work's very feminine, and she even commented on the fact that she didn't necessarily want her art to last. It was there for the show, and I sort of resonate with that because a lot of my work I make is made out of paper mache. It's sort of expanded painting. Even performance to an extent is just there for the performance. It's not there for it's not there for the long term necessarily, apart from the recordings. So sort of that really resonates with me, and I can't think of anybody else. But I mean, there's lots of artists that I admire, to be honest with you. Like I really like Louise Bourgeois, because looking at her work in relation to my research, and it's interesting the fact that she always made all these large-scale installations, sculptures, and interestingly, she was also a painter and a printmaker, which also is another area that I'm because I printmake myself, and she again was interested in the relationship of being a mother and an artist. And so I mean, the list is endless. Like, I only really focused on Eva Hess because I'm particularly interested in materials and objects and performance, and her work is very material based. And I like the fact she's always experimenting, and I'm experimenting in my studio, making a large collage painting. I don't know where it's going to go. I've got lots of weird objects on it. It might be a complete disaster, but I just feel like I'm doing that all the time in my own art practice. I'm not really following any particular instructions or anything. I'm just sort of making it up as I go along, which was very apparent she was doing as well, and quite a few of her different works. But I recommend watching the documentary. It's really good. It's worth watching.
And then, Janet, you...
I found this really hard, but I do...
It is a hard question, I'm sorry.
But actually, I'm glad I chose this. So film, I think, is really important. Film and literature really, I think, are probably things that can inform me a lot in what I do and think about. And I love this film. It's Bright Star, and it's a Jane Campion film. I love Jane Campion anyway. I love her work, and I think she's really good on a certain kind of female subjectivity. And this, I don't know if anyone knows this film, but it's a really beautiful film, and it's about the relationship between Keats and, oh my God, I can't remember the character's name, but she's Fanny, yeah, and they live in the same house, and she makes this exquisite sewing. She sews, and she's sort of the dialogue between them is a lot about why his work as a poet is seen as high and worthy, and her work isn't. It's seen as fashion, and she says like, well, my work at least is going to make me money as well. She says. And she makes this beautiful, very skillful bits of sewing in her bedroom, and I think that's a really I think there's a lot of thing about women doing things that are amazing in their homes, you know, and
You can do it anywhere.
inspired.
I think it's
Yeah.
wonderful.
And yeah, it's a beautiful film. I'd really recommend seeing that. So I quite often think about this character and this work that she does that's so small and takes so long and probably nobody ever sees. But that I think a lot of work like that goes on.
Amazing.
And I think I was just thinking that she did Top of the Lake, which is also great, you know, Top of the Lake and the piano, and so her work is really interesting. Jane Campion's work is really interesting as well. She's very much about celebrating women and looking at their lives.
Wonderful. Thank you both. That was amazing. Really informative and really interesting. And I wonder if at this point it's a good point to see if anyone would like to ask any questions to either Janet or Caro about their work or anything else.
What do you think the differences are between your work?
Between our works.
Yeah.
Are there any thematic similarities?
I think there's lots of connections. I think
there's a lot of differences.
Yeah.
Isn't it? Yeah. So,
what do you think?
yes, good question. Well, I think, we're both looking at, we're all looking more domestic than what I am. I'm a domestic scene, but then I'm also looking at needlework and sort of a lot of things that I'm making at the moment are like hand sewn pieces, you know, like my dabbers.
Yeah, I think
That's sort of like, I don't use a sewing machine, I do it all by hand, but. And then we've painted, we all more
I
painted.
can say what I think I really like about. I mean, I think. Can I say that? Because I don't know. I think that we've got very different concerns.
I think we have.
But I think I really like the way Caro makes objects. I think she's a really talented maker, and I think she also does a lot of stuff very intuitively. It's a bit bonkers sometimes.
Don't tell me.
And I love that, the way she makes. I think that there's a lot of intuition in the way she makes things.
Pushing the boundaries.
Yeah. I don't know. Didn't really answer your question.
We both use fabric, I suppose.
Yeah, I mean, I think I'm always really inspired when I see what she's doing.
But likewise, I'm always inspired by Janet. So.
And I think that obviously you've been much more involved in a kind of research, academic kind of thing. And I haven't, like since Goldsmiths, I've really been concentrating on being in the studio and making. So I think that brings different things with it. I was really moved by the way of that idea of revisiting Mary and just, you know, going back to those women and having that kind of dialogue with them. And I think that's a similarity in the way that kind of keeping going back to stuff. I don't know. I'm not really answering very well.
Question.
Any other
It's a good
questions?
question, a hard question.
Can I ask something? If you are like a professional who is interested in becoming an artist and who wasn't allowed to be one when as a child or something, would you say that in order to become an accomplished artist, you would have to also do some sort of, you would have to follow some sort of academia path in arts?
No, I don't know. I mean, I think it's really about doing and about practice. I did a very academic first fine art degree in Leeds, and it was half art history. You know, it was like 4 years, and there was a lot of academics in the studio, but there was a lot of art history. And I think Goldsmiths, there was a lot of theory. I mean, I chose that because I like that, and that's the thing I get lazy about when I'm not in an institution. So I knew if I went there, I'd do that reading. I think that that's really important. I mean, lots of people do study art and they don't do very much of that. But for me, that's really important because I think that makes you think about the context of your work. But I actually think making is really, really important. You discover a lot by making, and you just have to do it. You don't, you just have to do it a lot, and just do a lot of it. That's the thing. It's just to get started and follow your interest and keep going. That's what I'd say. And I think everybody can do it, and everyone should do it. They can.
Do you know what I mean? I was teaching a foundation course 2 years at Camberwell, and there's people all ages doing a foundation course, which is only 1 year. I think I didn't do a foundation because I went down a different route to I did design to begin with at Chelsea, and then I went to fine art after I'd had children, so I went the opposite way because I was literally like Eva Hess. My parents were like, you can't be a fine artist, there's no money in it. They're just so anti it, so I ended up doing design instead. But whilst I was teaching at Camberwell for 2 years, there was people doing, it made me realise I should have done a foundation course basically, because it has design, has fine art, it has every single sphere of art and design, and you can do that at any age. And then my other friend, she's actually doing a Terps Bananas course at the moment in painting. So, and that sounds, that's really good as well. Another way of doing it, if you primarily knew you wanted to be a painter, I'd recommend that because they're just like short courses.
What's it called, sorry?
Banana Terps.
Terps Bananas.
It's not
postgrad though, really, isn't it?
Is it? Yeah. Okay. I think foundation is probably the best route. If I could do foundation again, I'd probably do one. I'd probably do one now even, because I just think you get all those areas for 6 weeks where you're just trying every single discipline. So most, Janet probably did a foundation.
I didn't actually, and I didn't, and it was really a difficult thing that I didn't.
Yeah.
And I was really, it took me a long time to get over not doing a foundation. I think it's only really having done an MFA that I've got over not having done a foundation. For years I was like, I never did a foundation, I'm not good enough. And so I think it's really important as well because you have that time to try lots of things. But I think in terms of study and academic study, one of the things that was great about Goldsmiths was you followed your interest. So you did have some lectures, but they weren't, sometimes they hit the mark and sometimes they didn't, but you had your critical theory interest in your practice that you followed through. And I think it's like there's a saying as making, it's finding the thing that you're really kind of obsessively interested in and then going and doing the research, because there's theory about and discourse about anything in the world you can imagine if you've got access. We don't even need a library actually, because there's just loads of resources online. You just need to start, get stuck in.
But most of the art colleges in London, like Slade, Royal College, people do like 1 week short courses in foundation. Those are really good. They like Kingston does, because I did a lot of research on foundation courses whilst I was teaching it. So you could do 1 week in the summer or 2 weeks, and they usually do 1 day in each area. So it's quite a good way of also getting back to it. And Royal College of Art's even doing now graduate diploma. It's a new course. I think it started about 2 years ago, but that would also be quite a good place to look at.
Thanks.
Yeah.
Royal Drawing School as well, for you to drawing. They do.
Sorry. Are there any other questions?
I was just wondering, Janet, you did a lot about what I read, disease and about pattern. Or did you do something that was about like cancer and patterns? Are you working on anything like that at the moment? Are you looking to do more?
Yeah.
Is it because of coronavirus?
No. At the moment I'm doing some things that are really about lymph nodes, but they are and germs actually. I'm doing some stuff about strep B. That's in my work at the moment. And I think I keep going around in circles with that thing of kinds of, I'm really interested in the thing about, us being multi-organisms and non-human really, so I'm sure I'll keep being interested. And I think that electron microscopes are just amazing, and there's just all these things that when you start looking at images, then you start wanting to draw them because they're just amazing. So yeah, I will. I did a lot of stuff about cancer because that was a personal thing in my life, and that's transmuted into something else, I guess.
Is that kind of thing quite hard to, it's not very marketable because it's not a nice topic and it's quite difficult for people to look at and consider.
Yeah, I think it is, and I think, yeah, I don't know.
Important, isn't it? Because
Yeah, I mean, I think it's really important because 1 and 2 people, you know, it's very important. And I also think that part of what I think I do with it is that and this is probably really, because I think for me it's about me processing something. A lot of work is about me getting to grips with something. So I think there is a thing about making something that's really hideous beautiful. Like I think those wormy things on the aprons, I mean, they are kind of like, I'm thinking about intestinal worms, but they're actually quite, I think, I want to make them quite beautiful things. I'm really into like, I'm really also influenced by Studio Ghibli and that kind of thing, of that age between things that are really repulsive and things that are really beautiful. So I think people seem to like them, because I think I probably make them palatable. I could make them really much more gross, I think, probably. But I think I'm not. I think if I was braver, maybe I'd make them much grosser. But I kind of always want to make it all right, sort of thing. Yeah. But I don't think it's particularly marketable. No. Yeah.
Would anyone else like to ask questions? So I'm going to say, I mean, I think there are probably some more questions that will come in the next few minutes when people are mingling afterwards. But thank you both very much for
listening to us.
So it's been a real treat and a really positive experience as well to be able to play very good and questions from you both. So thank you.
Thank you.